The horse slowed before he pulled the reins. Its ears twitched, head low, breathing light. Something in the wind made it hesitate. He looked up. Sky was going lavender. That short, quiet moment when dusk slips in behind you without asking. He scanned the brush. Nothing moved. No birds. No rabbits. No coyotes. Just a stillness that didn't sit right. He let the horse walk on. Quiet, careful. The trail narrowed into a gully, dry, shallow, and lined with mesquite. Then he saw it. A body, small, curled up near a dead stump, arms tight around its knees. He dismounted slowly, boots soft against the dirt. The horse stayed put. He stepped forward. The figure didn't move. A girl, no more than 10. Skin dark and cracked from sunburn, face hidden beneath a mess of hair and dust. She looked more ghost than child, and beside her, a piece of bread, dry, cracked, uneaten. He knelt, watched her chest, waited, then saw it, the rise and fall, breath, barely, alive. He took the canteen from his saddle, opened it slow, poured a few drops onto his fingers, then touched them to her lips. She didn't stir, but her throat moved. He tried again. More water. This time her hand twitched. Fingers curled toward the crust of bread. He nudged it closer. Didn't speak. Didn't move. Just watched. And in that moment, with nothing but wind and dry grass around them, he felt it again. Like the land itself was holding its breath. Before we ride further, I'd like to know, where are you listening from? Leave a comment below. He laid his coat over her shoulders. She didn't wake, but the trembling slowed, and he whispered, more to himself than her. This land's cruel, but sometimes it gives one back. He sat down near her, not close, but close enough that she'd know he wasn't a threat, or at least not the worst kind. The horse grazed quietly behind them. Even the wind seemed to hush. He took out a bit of jerky from his coat, chewed slow, watched the sky turn darker, stars pricking through in scattered clusters. Her breathing settled, steady now, not strong, but steady. He leaned back against his saddlebag, and for a moment, just a moment, he wasn't in the basin anymore. He was 20 years younger, leaning over a cot in a one-room shack, watching a boy with fever sweat through another night. That boy had his mother's eyes and his own stubborn jaw. But he hadn't made it to spring. Some nights the rancher still heard him breathing, or trying to. He shook the thought off, looked at the girl again. She'd shifted in her sleep, pulled the bread closer to her chest. He reached for his blanket, folded it and placed it beside her. If she made it to morning, they'd ride. And if not, well... He looked up at the stars again, and whispered the same thing he had that night, long ago, to the boy who didn't answer. Hang on if you can. He hadn't slept, not even a little. Not because he didn't want to, because he didn't dare. Too quiet, too still. Even the horses shifted less than usual. He sat with his back against the saddle, knees bent, rifle resting across his lap. The girl hadn't moved, but her breath came steady, now and then catching with a sound like wind through dry leaves. That was something. The stars above held their silence, big old things, always watching. He found himself watching too, not her, not the brush line, just the dark, and listening, not to anything in particular, but to everything all at once. The snap of a stick, a shift in grass, the creak of leather, each sound small, but together they made a shape. One he didn't like. He'd seen it before, out in Salt Ridge years back. Old camp burned to nothing, food untouched, no blood, no bodies, just gone, and the same silence, same breathless hush that felt like it didn't belong to the land at all. He rubbed the corner of his mouth. A nervous habit. It didn't help. The wind picked up again, brushing past the gully like a warning with no words. He reached for his revolver, not because he needed it, but because it helped to hold something real. His fingers tightened around the handle. That's when he heard it. Not footsteps, not animal, just something moving where nothing should. He turned slow, quiet, eyes narrowing toward the shadowed ridge. There, just beyond the mesquite, a ripple in the dark. He stood, rifle raised. The horse whinnied once, soft and low, but nothing charged. No sound followed. No shape stepped into the moonlight. He waited, held his breath, counted 10 heartbeats, then 20. Silence. Again. He lowered the rifle. Whatever it was, wind or watching, it had passed. He walked back toward the girl. She was on her side now. One hand curled beneath her chin, the other still wrapped around that crust of bread. Her brow creased, a flicker behind her eyelids. Then, a word, maybe, just a sound, but it brushed the air between them like a thread pulled from a frayed coat. He didn't ask, didn't lean closer, just listened. And when nothing followed, he pulled his blanket tighter around her, sat back beside the fireless pit, and watched the stars blink slower now, fewer. The night stretched. He thought about lighting a fire, just for warmth, just for comfort, but the memory of Salt Ridge sat too close. So he let the cold settle in instead. The girl didn't stir again. That sound, whatever it was, had faded into the brush. But it stayed with him, in his chest, like a thought that wouldn't finish forming. He stared at the sky, trying to count the stars and failing. Behind him, an owl called once, then went quiet. It would be morning soon. Not light, not yet, but close. He stayed where he was, eyes open, body still, heart refusing to rest. And the girl breathed beside him, one slow rise and fall at a time. The morning came slow, the kind of dawn that didn't paint the sky so much as lift the dark off it, like peeling back a worn blanket. Pale light rolled in from the east, spilling across the gully in soft gold and blue. The girl was awake. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her eyes were open, half-lidded, watching the horizon like she'd never trusted a sunrise. He offered her water. No words, just the canteen. She took it with a trembling hand, sipped once, twice, then set it down. He knelt across from her, resting his elbows on his knees. "I figure you're not much for talking," he said. She said nothing. "But you're hearing me. That's enough." Birds stirred in the distance. A hawk's cry echoed sharp through the air. He looked out across the open field beyond the brush. Something had changed. Stillness, but not like last night. This was different, intentional. He stood, scanning the horizon. That's when he saw them. Just outlines at first. 2, maybe 3, mounted, motionless, far off, but facing them, watching. He narrowed his eyes. They weren't moving in, just there, like a warning nailed into the earth. He walked a few steps away from the girl, then stopped. Didn't want to put his back to them. Didn't want to get too far either. She hadn't moved, but her lips parted, barely a whisper. "Watching." He turned. Her voice was dry, but certain, like she hadn't said a word in days, but this one was waiting for its time. He looked back to the ridge. They were still there. Not a twitch, not a sound. He'd seen ambushes, raids, scouting parties. This wasn't that. This was patience, and something else. He returned to her side. "We're leaving," he said. She blinked slowly, then gave the faintest nod. Not fear, not trust, just readiness. He began saddling the horse. He worked quiet, fast. Years of practice stitched into every motion. The saddle creaked, leather straps pulled tight. He glanced at the girl, still sitting, still holding that bread like it was a name she wasn't ready to give. "Can you ride?" he asked. No reply. But she stood, slow, careful. Her legs trembled under her, but she didn't fall. He helped her up without asking. Lifted her onto the saddle like she weighed nothing, though his shoulder ached from the night. She clutched the horn, barely balanced. He stepped back and looked toward the ridge again. They were gone. No dust, no sound, no sign. Only wind where warriors had been. That made him more nervous than if they'd stayed. He mounted behind her. The horse shifted, sensing the weight. He gave it a soft nudge. They started west. No trail, no map, just instinct. And the feeling that whatever had just passed wasn't over. Not even close. As the sun crept higher, lighting the tips of the hills, he felt her lean back against his chest. Not fully. Not like she trusted him. Just enough to keep from falling. He didn't say anything. But a thought rose and refused to leave. He wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, for the first time in years, that didn't feel like a bad thing. They rode in silence. The kind that stretches between two people who know the rules. Don't ask, don't push, just move forward. The land opened up into low hills and sagebrush flats. The sun was higher now, laying hot light across their backs, baking yesterday's chill out of the dirt. She hadn't spoken again, but she stayed upright. He kept the horse steady, careful not to jostle her too much. Every few minutes, she'd glance sideways, never behind them, always to the ridge, like waiting for something to reappear. By midday, they reached an old cattle trail that cut between two dry ravines. He slowed the horse, pulled to a stop beneath a bent cottonwood. Time for rest. Water. Maybe answers. She slid down on her own this time, wobbled, but stayed up. He watched her crouch beside a patch of shade, fold her knees under her chin like she'd done it 1,000 times before. He offered jerky. She took it. He sat across from her, leaned against a stone. "I reckon someone's looking for you," he said. She chewed, slow. Didn't answer. He tried again. "That group on the ridge, they were scouts," she interrupted. He blinked. She hadn't just understood him, she'd corrected him. Her voice wasn't strong, but it was clear, steady. "Scouts for who?" he asked. She looked at him then, really looked. For the first time he saw her eyes weren't just tired. They were sharp, trained. "Not who," she said. "What?" Before he could ask, a soft thud echoed behind the rock line. Then another. Hooves. He was on his feet before he realized he'd moved. The rifle was in his hands, finger off the trigger, but close. The girl didn't run. Didn't hide. She stood slowly, turned toward the sound with the same kind of calm he'd seen in old soldiers. The brush parted ahead. One rider. Alone. Middle-aged. Broad shoulders. Blanket draped over one side of the horse. No weapons drawn, but that didn't mean anything. He stopped 10 paces out and raised one hand. "I don't mean harm," he called. His accent was thick, northeastern. The rancher didn't lower the rifle. The man glanced past him toward the girl. She didn't speak, didn't move. "You're holding what's not yours," the man said. His voice wasn't angry. It was final, like he was just reciting a fact of nature. The rancher's jaw tightened. "She wasn't breathing when I found her." The man didn't argue. "Still not yours." The wind picked up. Neither moved. "I don't know what you think she is," the rancher said. "But I fed her, watered her, kept her alive." The man nodded once. Like that mattered. Like it didn't. "You'll be met before sunset," he said, then turned his horse and rode off. No threat, no rush. Just certainty. The girl finally exhaled. "They know where we are," she said. He didn't ask how. She picked up her bag. He helped her mount. "We keep moving," he said. But the air was different now. He could feel it. like someone had taken aim at them with time instead of bullets. Something had begun, and it wasn't stopping. Not anymore. The trail narrowed into a dry wash hemmed in by jagged stone. It wasn't a path made for riders, but they had no better choice. The girl held on tighter now, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Each mile seemed to drag, the terrain pulling more out of her than she could give. The rancher kept the horse steady, weaving between boulders and low shrubs. A wrong step here could mean a shattered leg, for the horse or for them. They rode until the sun dipped past its peak and the sky turned a dull bronze. No signs of pursuit, but no signs of peace either. He pulled them to a stop beneath a rock overhang, just wide enough to offer shade. There was no firewood to be found. They'd go without, again. She slid off the horse and sat down hard, saying nothing. He handed her the canteen. She drank all of it this time. "I've ridden through this wash before," he said, settling down beside her. "Last spring. Wasn't dry then." She didn't answer, just pulled a small object from her coat. A scrap of hide, worn, cracked, painted with faded markings. He leaned in, recognizing the shapes. "Your work?" he asked. She shook her head. "My brother made it. He told stories when the wind blew right, said some were older than the land." She ran her thumb across the surface. "They took him when the rains came." He frowned. "Who?" She didn't speak, but the way her fingers tightened around the hide told him enough. This wasn't just grief. It was something colder. Stolen. She stared out into the canyon like the walls might echo him back. The rancher didn't press. Not now. Instead, he unpacked a small cloth bundle, jerky, dried beans, a little cornmeal, and laid it out between them. She ate in silence, methodically, always keeping that scrap of hide within reach. He looked up at the sky. Still. No birds. No wind. And then, movement. Not far, just beyond the canyon mouth. A figure, standing still, watching. He stood slowly, one hand drifting toward his rifle, but not drawing. The girl didn't flinch. She didn't even turn. "I know," she said quietly before he could ask. "You recognize him?" No. But there was no fear in her voice, just certainty. The figure didn't move, didn't call out, didn't raise a weapon, just stood there like he'd always been part of the land. The rancher took a few steps forward, squinting into the glare. He was about to shout, but the figure turned and vanished behind a rise of stone. Gone. The girl stood up beside him. She pointed toward a notch in the canyon wall, half hidden behind brush. "There's another way through," she said. He glanced at her. "You been here before?" "No," she said. "He showed me." He didn't ask who, didn't argue, not now. He just nodded. "Then let's move." They followed the narrow pass until it spilled into a shallow basin, flat land ringed by stone, where silence seemed to press down from above. The sun hung low behind the canyon walls, bleeding orange into a sky already fading to dusk. Ahead stood a structure, low, sunken, more ruin than building. Old timber, weathered cloth nailed across a bent frame, and a rusted stovepipe barely visible above the roofline. The girl dismounted without waiting. He watched her walk up to the ruin like she'd been here before, though he knew she hadn't. The rancher followed, rifle slung but ready. The place didn't look lived in. Didn't smell like it either. But it wasn't abandoned, not entirely. There were boot tracks in the dust. Fresh, ash in the stove. And hanging from the rafters, 3 lengths of braided horsehair dyed red at the tips. He paused at the threshold. "This means something to you?" he asked. The girl stood in the center of the room, her back to him. She nodded once. "It's a warning." "Meant for who?" She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. for whoever follows. He didn't like the sound of that, but he said nothing. Not yet. Instead, he walked the room. One corner held a pile of blankets, a cracked cup, a worn bag with a single scrap of parchment tucked inside. He pulled it out. The drawing was rough, crude charcoal lines, but it was a face. Her face. The girl stood beside him now. She looked down at the sketch. That's why they want me. The rancher swallowed hard. Outside, the wind picked up. The horses shifted. And from somewhere beyond the ridge came the sound of a bell. Low, deep, moving closer. The sound came again. Louder this time, echoing through the canyon in long, metallic waves. The rancher stepped outside, rifle up, eyes scanning the horizon. Dust curled over the ridge. Not wind, movement. He counted shapes. 6. No. 8. Horsemen. Still distant, but closing fast. He turned back to the girl. She hadn't moved. "Do we run?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not yet." "What the hell does that mean?" She pointed to the stove. "Check the pipe." He climbed onto the broken table and looked inside. At first, nothing. Then, scratched into the soot and rust, symbols. Not English. Not anything he recognized. But she did. "They're here for the drawing," she said. "They think I'm her." He blinked. "You're not?" "I don't know." The words hit harder than he expected. She stepped closer, voice calm. "But I remember the man who made that drawing." His brow furrowed. "Who?" "My brother." The pieces started fitting, but the picture only grew stranger. "You said he was taken." "He was." She turned toward the ruin's far wall and lifted a plank aside. Behind it, shallow dirt, freshly turned. The rancher stared. "You buried someone?" She nodded. "A scout. Found us 2 days ago. Tried to drag me back." "You killed him?" Her silence was answer enough. Outside, the bell rang again. Closer now. Clearer. More of them. She met his eyes. "We can't run forever." The rancher glanced at the ridge, then at the dirt, then back at her. He nodded once. "Then we don't." Night had fallen like a curtain, sudden and thick. The only light came from a sliver of moon and the embers of a small fire they dared to make behind the ruin's wall. No smoke, just enough heat to warm hands and dry sweat. The rancher sat with his back to stone, rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the basin. The girl hadn't said much since the bell. She sat across from him, legs tucked, her head lowered as if listening to something inside the earth. Around them the world had grown impossibly quiet. Then, footsteps. Not the rhythm of a man in a hurry. Measured. Soft. Intentional. The rancher raised the rifle just slightly, but the girl lifted her hand. Not him. He frowned but held. A moment later the man stepped into view. Not one of the riders. Older. Broad-shouldered. Long hair streaked with gray, tied back beneath a faded red band. He carried no weapon, just a pouch slung across his chest, and a carved walking stick that struck the ground in slow rhythm. The rancher didn't lower the gun. The man stopped just short of the fire's edge. "I don't mean harm," he said. His voice was deep but calm. "You found the marker." The girl nodded. "She's the one," he said, not looking at the rancher. "Though she doesn't know what that means yet." The rancher spoke low. "You followed us?" "No, I waited, like I was told." "By who?" The man finally looked at him. His eyes were dark and flat. "By her brother." That landed heavy. The girl shifted. "My brother's dead." The man's gaze didn't change. "Maybe. Maybe not." He reached into the pouch and pulled out a strip of cloth. Unfolded it. laid it on the ground. Another drawing. This one clearer, newer. The same face, same eyes, but not charcoal. Ink. Signed with a symbol the rancher had seen before, on the hide in her pocket. She stared at it in silence. The man said nothing more. He simply turned and walked back into the dark. The fire burned down to coals. Neither of them spoke for a long time after the stranger disappeared into the dark. The drawing still lay between them, catching moonlight just enough to show her face. Again, only clearer this time. As if whoever had made it knew her better than she knew herself. The rancher stared at it. Why would he send that man instead of coming himself? The girl didn't answer, didn't blink, didn't even seem to breathe. When she finally looked up, her eyes had gone hard again. Because he's not free. The rancher studied her a moment, then nodded. So the men riding in are coming for you, but not just you. No, she said. They're coming for what I remember. Before he could ask what that meant, the horses spooked. One neighed sharp and kicked against its tether. The other backed into stone and whinnied, eyes wild. The rancher was on his feet, rifle up, scanning. Nothing moved, no figures, no sound. And then a voice, sharp, female, from somewhere just beyond the ring of stone. You got something that don't belong to you. The rancher turned toward the sound. He couldn't see her, but he knew she was close. How many of you? He asked. A pause. Then, enough. Another voice chimed in, this one older, worn like boots left out too long in the sun. We don't want the girl. We want what she carries. The rancher looked at the hide scrap in her hand, the drawing, the symbols in the pipe. All of it. Memories, stories, secrets. He stepped in front of her. She's not giving you anything. Another silence. Then the first voice again. We'll take it off her body if we have to. He raised the rifle. You can try. That drew a laugh, short, cold. Then silence again. But he knew they hadn't gone far. They were waiting. The girl stood behind him now. I know a place, she said. Not far. Hidden. My brother called it the Ash Hollow. He turned to her. Is it safe? She didn't answer the question, just said, It's where the story ends. He nodded once. Then let's take them there. They left before first light. No fire. No words. The girl rode ahead this time, guiding them through jagged outcrops and winding ravines that barely fit the horses. Her body knew the way, even if her memory didn't. Behind them, no sounds followed, but the rancher could feel the pursuit, like heat rising just behind his neck. Ash Hollow wasn't on any map. He'd spent half his life chasing strays and storm clouds across these lands, and he'd never heard of it. But he followed her without hesitation. Just before midday, the terrain changed. The cliffs narrowed. The wind dropped. And then it opened. A shallow vale, green with wild grass and cottonwood, sunken low and wrapped in stone like a cradle. Dead center stood a tall wooden frame, blackened, charred. Once a structure, now just ribs and ruin. She dismounted and walked toward it, slow. Her hands brushed the air like she expected ghosts. The rancher stayed back, watching her circle the burned frame. "What is this place?" he finally asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt near one corner and pulled something from the earth. A metal shard, half melted, stamped with a mark, a circle crossed by an arrowhead. She held it out. "My brother said this was where the fire started." He took it, turning it over. This was a church. She nodded. They burned it, with people still inside. He looked around again. The bones of the place were still visible. Timbers, broken beams, scorched ground. "How many?" he asked. Her voice barely rose above the wind. 17. The rancher closed his eyes a moment. When he opened them, she was walking again, toward the far edge where the grass gave way to ash. And buried in the middle, half concealed, stood a post. Old, split, but still standing. He followed. Nailed to the wood was another drawing, fresh, still wet, and beside it, stuck into the earth, was his knife, the one he'd lost 3 days back. The girl didn't flinch. "I think they're already here." The rancher crouched beside the post, running a finger along the blade's handle. It had dried blood on it. Old. Not his, not hers. They were being watched. He felt it in his bones, the same way you feel a storm before the clouds show. The girl took a few steps back and looked up at the canyon rim. Nothing visible. But she turned, slowly, as if tracking something only she could sense. "We should leave," he said. She shook her head. "This is where they want it to end." "You mean us?" She pointed at the knife. "They could have killed us already." The rancher frowned. She was right. Whoever left this wanted to be seen, wanted the fear to build. "They want us to choose fear," she said. The wind shifted. A faint creak echoed down the canyon, wooden, rhythmic. Then another, then silence. The rancher stood, rifle in hand, scanning the slope behind them. "I count 4 ways in," he said. "We can't hold them off if they come at once." She turned to him, calm. "We won't." He blinked. "We won't what?" "We won't hold them off." She walked past him to the center of the burned ground, knelt, pressed her palm into the ash. Her voice was low. "I came here once before, in a dream." The wind stirred. Ash rose around her like smoke curling in reverse. He watched, unsure whether to call it madness or something worse. She stood again. "There's something buried here, under the church." "What?" "I don't know, but it's waiting." He gripped the rifle tighter. "I hope it's on our side." The wind picked up again, stronger this time, curling ash and dust into the sky like smoke from a long-dead fire being stirred awake. The girl didn't move. She stood in the same spot, eyes on the ground beneath her feet, as if waiting for it to speak. The rancher kept watch on the rim, still no movement. But it was too quiet, too still. Like the land itself was holding its breath. Then, movement. From the north trail, a single figure, on foot, long coat, wide hat, rifle slung low. The rancher raised his own, aimed but didn't fire. The figure stopped halfway into the clearing, lifted a hand, then spoke. "Name's Cooper. I rode with her brother, long time ago." The girl didn't react, but the rancher stepped forward. "He's dead." Cooper nodded. "That's what they wanted you to believe." He pulled a pouch from his coat and tossed it underhand toward them. It landed soft in the dirt. Inside, 2 items. A ring, and a strip of leather. The girl knelt, opened it. The ring was carved bone, stained dark. She turned it over. There, etched inside, her name. Not the one she gave the rancher. The one she hadn't spoken since the fire. She looked up. Cooper met her eyes. "He's close, closer than they want you to know." The rancher didn't lower his rifle. "What do you want?" "To help," Cooper said. "If you'll let me." The wind shifted again, and this time, shouts, far off, but not far enough. The riders were coming, fast. Cooper's eyes narrowed. "You'll have to decide quick." The girl stood, took the ring, slipped it on, then nodded once. "Then let's finish what he started." The rancher lowered his rifle, just slightly. Not trust. Not yet. But time was bleeding out. Cooper turned, scanning the canyon walls. "They'll come through the upper draw first. 3 on horseback, 2 on foot, 1 up high with glass." "You sure?" Cooper gave a tight nod. "Been watching them longer than you think." The girl stepped between them, holding the ring tight. "What do they want?" Cooper looked at her like she should already know. "They want what's under here. Same thing your brother tried to protect. Same thing that got the church burned. She swallowed. Then we stopped them. The rancher shouldered his rifle and moved to the ridge where the draw opened into the hollow. He found a place with cover, flat stone, broken brush. He laid prone, sighted down the scope, and waited. Seconds passed. Then hoofbeats, fast. Cooper joined him, laying his own rifle across the stone. "I'll take left, you take center." The rancher didn't respond, just breathed, steadied, watched. And then, figures. The first rider broke over the ridge, then two more. The girl stood in the hollow center, unmoving, a shadow in the ash. One of the riders raised his hand, signaling halt, but it was too late. The rancher squeezed the trigger. The first rider dropped. The others scattered, dismounting, taking cover behind stone. Return fire cracked off the ridge, carving splinters into the dirt inches from his cheek. He rolled, moved position, fired again. Below, Cooper picked off the flank. And through it all, the girl stood still, eyes closed, hands at her sides. Whispers moved around her like wind. And beneath her feet, the ground began to tremble. The ground shuddered once, then again, stronger. The ash beneath the girl's boots pulsed like breath. She didn't move, didn't flinch. Cooper and the rancher both paused, rifles up, scanning. But it wasn't bullets they feared anymore. The wind died. Everything stopped. Then, light. A glow seeped up through the cracked dirt. Pale, blue, alive. The girl whispered something neither man understood. The ash around her rose in slow spirals, and from the center of the burned church, something began to emerge. Not a creature, not a ghost, a structure. Wood, stone, bone. As if the land had remembered what once stood here, and was building it again. The riders froze. Even the ones with guns drawn didn't move. One of them dropped his weapon and stepped back, eyes wide. Another fell to his knees. The girl opened her eyes. They burned silver. She raised a hand, not to threaten, but to call. The drawing in her pocket lifted with the wind and floated toward the forming structure. It vanished in the light. Then silence. A pressure lifted from the hollow. The kind of weight only the guilty could feel. The rancher stood slowly, lowering his rifle. Cooper exhaled. The girl knelt, pressed her hand into the dirt one last time, and the light faded. The ash settled. And where there once was ruin, now stood a simple stone marker. Unmarked, but final. The riders didn't speak. They turned their horses and rode away. The rancher looked at her. "What did you just do?" She stood. "Buried the fire." He nodded once. No more words needed. They rode out of Ash Hollow together. No one followed. Not this time. They walked out of the hollow on foot at first. The horses had wandered off during the gunfire. Cooper retrieved them from a nearby thicket, quiet and steady, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. As he handed the reins back to the rancher, he paused. "You did more than bury fire today," he said. "You gave the land something to remember." The rancher nodded. "Not sure what it means." "You don't have to. Just ride." He turned, mounted his own horse, and disappeared westward without another word. The girl and the rancher rode side by side for a while. No questions, no explanations, just the wind. At the ridge, she reached into her pocket and pulled something out, a small carved pendant. Old, cracked, but clearly loved. She rode back down, dismounted at the stone marker, and placed it gently at its base. No prayer, no speech, just silence. When she returned, the rancher didn't ask what it was, but he looked at her differently. Not as a burden, not as a mystery, but as someone who had survived more than she should have. They rode east. Ash Hollow vanished behind them. Not erased, but settled. And in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. the kind of understanding forged not in words, but in fire and dust. If you made it this far, tell us where you're watching from. And if this story stayed with you, let us know in the comments. There's more to come from Silent West Stories.